The quiet man in the glass showroom, do you know what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness? Do you know how fast people forget the faces that once inspired them? And do you know how one silent man can still remind the world what respect really means? It started on a slow Sunday morning in Los Angeles. The sun was sharp and warm, yet the streets felt strangely cold. A quiet man in dark jeans and a faded gray jacket walked slowly toward a high-end car dealership near Beverly Boulevard. No one noticed him at first. He moved with the calm of someone who had already seen too much noise in life. That man was Keanu Reeves. Inside the glass showroom, the air smelled of new leather and expensive polish. A few salesmen stood near a shining red sports car, laughing in low tones. One of them, a tall man in his 30s with slicked hair, saw Keanu entering and frowned slightly. He didn't recognize him right away. Fame, after all, hides behind humility. Keanu had no bodyguard, no assistant, no sunglasses to announce who he was. Just a simple man with hands in his pockets and a quiet smile that could disarm even anger itself. He walked up to the reception desk and said in his soft, polite tone, "Hi, I was hoping to take a look at the new model you have on display. The hybrid one." The woman behind the desk looked up briefly, scanned his jacket, and hesitated. "Sir, are you sure you can afford that model? It's not for display test drives. Only potential buyers with appointments can see details." Her words were sharp, but not cruel. Just the kind of tone people use when they think they already know who someone is. Keanu smiled gently. "No worries," he said. "I just wanted to see it up close. I'm interested in electric engines, that's all." He stepped back, as if giving space, never raising his voice. But from a distance, the tall salesman walked over with an exaggerated sigh. "Hey, buddy," he said. "This area's not for window shoppers. We've had enough people come in just to take pictures and post them online. We don't allow that." A few customers nearby turned to look. Some recognized the man immediately. Their eyes widened, but they stayed silent, unsure if it was really him. Keanu chuckled softly, not defensive at all. "I'm not here for photos. I'm just curious about the car." The salesman gave a small laugh. "Curious, right? You and half of Los Angeles." He pointed toward the exit. "Go check out used cars down the street. They're more your level." The tension thickened like smoke. One of the younger staff members whispered, "Wait, isn't that Keanu Reeves?" But the tall man ignored it. He took a step closer, clearly trying to assert control. Maybe he had a bad morning, or maybe he thought showing power in front of rich clients made him look strong. But what happened next changed everything. As Keanu quietly moved aside to leave, another customer, a heavy man in a designer jacket, bumped into him hard, spilling his coffee. "Watch where you're going," the man snapped. Keanu instantly apologized, grabbing tissues, helping clean the spill. "My fault," he said. "Sorry about that," the man sneered. "Yeah, you better be sorry." He looked at the tall salesman and laughed loudly. "These guys come in here like they own the place." The salesman nodded, adding mockingly, "Yeah, think they're movie stars or something." And then, in that strange twist of irony, someone from across the room said clearly, "But he is." Every head turned. Phones were raised. One woman gasped. "That's Keanu Reeves." The silence that followed felt like a crack in the air. The salesman froze. The rude customer blinked, confused, his hand still half raised from the motion of brushing off the coffee. Keanu didn't move. He didn't even frown. He simply said, "It's okay. No need to make a scene." But the salesman, embarrassed, tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on. If you were really him, you wouldn't be walking around like this." A few seconds later, a man from the manager's office walked in and instantly recognized Keanu. "Oh my God, Mr. Reeves," he said breathlessly. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding." But before the words could cool the air, the rude customer, still feeling exposed, muttered something under his breath about attention seekers. Keanu turned his head slightly, calm as ever, and said quietly, "It costs nothing to be kind." And that single line, simple, soft, almost whispered, ignited something unexpected. The customer, red-faced, took a step forward. "What did you say?" Keanu repeated, still gentle. "It costs nothing to be kind." The man's pride flared like gasoline. "Are you mocking me?" Keanu shook his head. "No, sir. I'm reminding myself." And then, in a moment that would later be replayed across millions of screens, the man shoved Keanu hard in the chest. Phones went up. A loud gasp filled the showroom. Keanu stumbled back into the glass wall beside the red car. Before anyone could stop him, the man pushed again. This time, Keanu fell to the floor. Security rushed in. The tall salesman stepped back, horrified. "Wait, stop! He didn't do anything!" But the chaos was already alive. Keanu slowly got up, dusted his jacket, and said softly, "It's all right. I'm fine," but the next few seconds would change everything. Someone outside had been passing by, a familiar figure with a hat, sunglasses, and that unmistakable calm grace. It was Sandra Bullock. She had been visiting a nearby studio and stopped when she heard the commotion. She saw Keanu standing near the door, wiping his face, still composed, still refusing to raise his voice. Sandra's heart dropped. She rushed inside, her voice echoing through the stunned silence. "What happened here?" The rude customer froze mid-sentence. Everyone turned. Sandra went straight to Keanu, her eyes filled with both disbelief and pain. "Who did this?" The manager tried to explain, words tumbling out. "It was a misunderstanding, Miss Bullock, I swear. We didn't realize—" But Sandra wasn't listening. She looked at Keanu, saw the faint bruise forming on his cheek, and her hands trembled. "You said nothing, didn't you?" she whispered. "You let them treat you like that." Keanu smiled faintly. They were just doing their job, but his calm only deepened the emotion in her eyes. She turned to the salesman and the customer, her voice steady but filled with fire. "You threw a man like him out for being humble. You didn't even look long enough to see who he really was." The rude customer tried to speak, but she raised her hand sharply. Just don't." Cameras were already rolling. People whispered her name, his name, the story taking life before anyone could control it. In that moment, something powerful happened. Sandra took Keanu's hand and said quietly, "Let's go." They walked out together through the same glass doors he had entered so quietly minutes before. The crowd outside began to clap, not because they saw two movie stars, but because they saw something painfully human, a man who never defended himself, and a woman who couldn't stay silent anymore. As they disappeared into the bright California light, one reporter shouted, "Miss Bullock, what will you do about this?" She didn't turn back. She just said, "You'll see," and that single sentence, calm, cold, and full of promise, became the spark that set the internet on fire. The story was far from over. What happened next would test not only their bond, but the very idea of what grace under pressure truly means. When silence turns into a storm. Do you know what happens when someone finally stands up for quiet people? Do you know how silence can shake a room louder than shouting ever could? And do you know what happens when the world realizes it had been watching the wrong story all along? By the next morning, the video of the incident had already crossed 10 million views. It spread faster than truth could breathe. Every platform carried the same shocking headline: "Keanu Reeves thrown out of car dealership after being mistaken for poor man." Some clips showed the moment he was pushed. Others showed Sandra Bullock's face when she rushed to his side. But what caught people most was Keanu's calm. He didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't even frown. He just smiled and left. Comments flooded the internet. People wrote about respect, humility, and how the world had become blind to decency. Someone tweeted, "If Keanu Reeves can be treated like this, what hope do the rest of us have?" Another said, "Sandra Bullock's reaction shows real friendship, not Hollywood drama." And in less than 24 hours, the dealership became the most talked-about place in the country. Inside her Los Angeles home, Sandra sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She wasn't looking for drama or attention, but the anger inside her had no outlet. She replayed the video again, the moment Keanu was shoved, the way he looked down instead of fighting back. His calm made her proud and furious at the same time. When her assistant entered the room, Sandra said softly, "Schedule a press interview for this afternoon." The assistant froze. "About yesterday," Sandra nodded. Yes, but not to talk about fame. To talk about respect. Keanu, meanwhile, sat in his small garden, sipping tea and feeding a stray cat that had been visiting for weeks. He didn't open his phone, didn't read the headlines. When a friend called to ask if he was okay, he just said, "I'm fine. It's not the end of the world. People make mistakes." But deep inside, he knew something had shifted. Not just in public perception, but in Sandra herself. He had known her for decades, since the early days of their first movie together. He knew that once her heart decided something was unfair, she wouldn't rest until justice found a voice. That afternoon, Sandra arrived at a small press gathering outside her home. Reporters shouted questions. Flashes flickered like restless fireflies. But she didn't hide. She stepped up to the microphone, wearing a plain white shirt and no makeup, her voice steady as stone. "Yesterday," she began, "a man I deeply respect was treated with cruelty for no reason other than his humility. I'm not here to speak as an actress or a friend. I'm here as a human being who's tired of seeing kindness mistaken for weakness." The crowd fell silent. Cameras zoomed in. She continued, "The man you saw on that video didn't retaliate, didn't shout, didn't demand attention. He did what most people have forgotten how to do. He stayed calm. And that calmness embarrassed everyone who wronged him. I hope we all learn from it." One journalist raised a hand. "Miss Bullock, will there be legal action?" Sandra shook her head. "No. Forgiveness is stronger than punishment. But we will make sure no one else is humiliated like that again." Her statement went viral instantly. The next few hours were chaos. Brands, celebrities, and fans joined the conversation. Be Kind Like a Keanu trended worldwide. Donations poured into anti-bullying campaigns and kindness initiatives. Schools used the clip as a lesson on empathy, but in the middle of the global storm, Keanu stayed quiet. He visited the dealership that night when it was closed. No cameras, no reporters. He just left a handwritten note at the door that said, "Thank you for the lesson. I wish you peace." He signed it with no name. The next morning, the dealership owner called a public meeting. The salesman who had mocked Keanu came forward, shaking with red eyes. "I didn't know," he said. "I judged him by his clothes. I thought he was just another guy wasting my time. I'll never forgive myself." His voice broke midway. When reporters asked Keanu for a comment later, he finally spoke. "Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from anger. I forgive him. I just hope he forgives himself too." The simplicity of that line struck the world harder than any speech could. People called it the most graceful response they had ever heard. But what few knew was that behind his quiet words, Keanu was still struggling inside. That evening, Sandra visited him. She brought a box of homemade food and a look that mixed frustration with affection. "You should have said something," she said, setting the box on the table. "You shouldn't have walked away like that." Keanu smiled faintly. "Walking away doesn't mean giving up. Sometimes it means protecting your peace." She sighed deeply. "You always do this. You take pain and turn it into silence. But the world needs to see that even good men have limits." He looked at her quietly, the way he always did when words failed him. "You think if I had shouted back, it would have changed their hearts?" She paused. "Maybe not, but it would have shown that kindness isn't weakness." He smiled again. "And yet here we are. You spoke for me. That's strength enough." For a few minutes, neither spoke. The world outside buzzed with noise. But inside that small living room, there was only the sound of two old friends trying to understand the weight of decency in a world that no longer valued it. Sandra finally broke the silence. "They called me today. A talk show wants both of us to come on and talk about what happened. They said it could inspire people." Keanu shook his head immediately. "No, Sandra. I don't want to turn this into a performance." "It's not performance," she said quietly. "It's perspective. People saw the moment. They didn't see your heart," he hesitated. He didn't like public attention, but he also trusted her more than anyone. "If you really think it'll help someone," he said, "I'll go." She nodded. Then it settled. That night she sat awake long after he left. Her thoughts drifted back to their early days, how they once shared dreams, laughter, and heartbreak between takes of a movie that defined an era. She realized that even after years of fame, Keanu hadn't changed. He still carried the same gentle core that drew people toward him. But that gentleness came with a cost. The world often mistook it for fragility. She decided she would show the world the truth. Not through anger, but through clarity, through kindness that demanded respect. 2 days later, they appeared on national television together. The host greeted them warmly, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Millions watched live as the footage replayed once more on the giant screen behind them. The host turned to Keanu and asked, "When you were pushed, why didn't you react?" Keanu smiled. "Because anger only multiplies pain. I didn't want to be another example of how pride destroys peace." The host then turned to Sandra. "And what made you step in?" Sandra took a deep breath. "Because some people in this world still believe kindness needs protection." "I wanted them to know it doesn't," the audience applauded. But something about that moment felt unfinished. There was still a quiet storm behind Keanu's calm eyes, something unspoken. He had faced humiliation before, but this time it had reached his core in a way even he couldn't explain. As they left the studio, the host shook their hands. Outside, fans waited, holding signs that said, "Be kind like Keanu." He smiled, waved. But when Sandra turned to look at him in the car, she noticed his silence again. "What's wrong?" she asked. He looked out the window. Sometimes when the world finally listens, you realize how lonely the quiet ones have been all along. She didn't respond. She just reached out and touched his hand lightly, a silent promise that he wasn't alone anymore. But the story was far from over. In the coming days, someone from the dealership would make a shocking confession that would turn everything upside down and reveal that what happened to Keanu wasn't an accident at all. The secret behind the glass doors. Do you know how it feels when something you thought was random turns out to be planned? Do you know how quickly admiration can turn into betrayal? And do you know what happens when the truth finally catches up to those who pretend to be powerful? The world had begun to move on. The outrage was fading, the hashtags were slowing down, and the dealership had closed for internal review. Keanu had returned to his quiet routines, filming a small independent project, spending mornings on his motorcycle, and evenings reading scripts by his window. Sandra was back to her shoots too, though part of her mind kept circling back to that afternoon. The push, the bruise, the way he had smiled instead of breaking. Then, one morning, Sandra received a call from an unknown number. A trembling voice on the other end said, "Miss Bullock, I work at the dealership. Please, you need to know something." She frowned, stepping aside from the busy set. "Who is this?" The voice whispered. "It wasn't random." They knew he was coming. "Someone set it up." For a second, her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "The man who pushed him," the caller continued, "wasn't a real customer. He was told to provoke him. They wanted a reaction, a video, something they could sell to tabloids. It was all arranged by one of the marketing heads. They thought if they got footage of a celebrity losing his temper, it would go viral and give them exposure." Sandra's face went pale. "You're saying it was planned?" "Yes," the voice said. "But it went wrong." They never expected him to stay calm. Now everyone is trying to cover it up. Before she could ask more, the call disconnected. She stood there frozen, surrounded by lights and cameras that suddenly felt meaningless. Within seconds, her protective instinct took over. She called Keanu immediately. He answered after a few rings, his voice soft and steady as always. "Hey, Sandra, we need to talk," she said. "Not later. Now." They met at a small cafe in West Hollywood, a place with no photographers and no noise. She sat down across from him, her eyes filled with urgency. "It wasn't an accident," she said. "Someone planned that moment. They wanted to humiliate you for views." Keanu listened quietly, not interrupting. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "That makes sense," he said. "I saw a phone recording before anything happened. I thought it was just coincidence." "Coincidence," she said sharply. "Keanu, they used you," he nodded gently. "People will always use what they don't understand. If they wanted anger, I'm glad they got calm instead." But his calmness this time didn't reassure her. It frustrated her. "Why do you always take the weight of other people's cruelty and turn it into peace? You're not made of stone." He looked at her with a small, tired smile. "I just learned that revenge hurts twice. Once when you feel it, and again when you act on it." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Then let me act. Let me fight this." "No, Sandra," he said softly. "If you fight them now, they'll twist it again. They'll say we're seeking attention." She leaned back, tears forming. "Then what do we do?" "Just stay silent." He looked out the window. "No, we tell the truth, but in our way. Not through anger, through example." That evening, Sandra posted a long message online. She didn't accuse anyone by name. She didn't reveal what she knew. Instead, she wrote, "Some people tried to make kindness look weak. They failed. Because kindness doesn't depend on attention, it depends on truth." The post went viral instantly. It was shared by millions, quoted in articles, printed on posters, and even used in school classrooms. But behind that calm front, she and Keanu quietly began their own investigation. They met with a journalist who specialized in uncovering staged scandals. Her name was Elena Torres, a sharp-minded reporter known for her integrity. After listening to their account, Elena said, "I've heard rumors about the dealership's publicity stunts before. If you're willing, I'll dig." Keanu hesitated. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "If you find anything, make sure the truth helps people, not hurts them." Weeks passed. Sandra went on filming, but every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped. One evening, Elena finally called. "I found it," she said. "Emails, footage, everything. They were planning a viral marketing stunt. The push was staged, the insults were scripted, but something changed. The man who pushed you went too far. It wasn't supposed to be physical." Keanu's eyes darkened, but his voice stayed quiet. "And the salesman?" "He didn't know," Elena replied. "He was following instructions from above." Sandra felt her fists tighten. "We have to expose them." Elena paused. "Are you sure? Once this goes public, it'll explode again. Your names will be everywhere." Keanu leaned back, thinking deeply. "If the truth stays hidden, it teaches people the wrong lesson. They'll think it was just bad luck, not manipulation." And so, after careful thought, they agreed. The report was published under the headline, "How a Fake Scandal Backfired into a Lesson on Humility." It included the emails, the recordings, and the full story, how a corporation tried to stage humiliation for profit, only to be undone by the very decency they wanted to mock. The world's reaction was electric. People were furious. The dealership's owners issued public apologies. The marketing director resigned. And the man who had shoved Keanu released a trembling video, admitting he had been paid to provoke him. "I thought it was harmless," he said. "But when I saw the look in his eyes, I realized what I had become." The comment sections filled with one repeating line. He stayed kind even when the world didn't deserve it. Sandra watched all of it unfold with mixed emotions. She was proud of him, yet something about his serenity unsettled her. One night, she asked him quietly, "Doesn't it hurt, knowing they tried to destroy your dignity for money?" He looked down for a moment, then said, "Maybe that's why dignity matters, because it's the one thing they can't buy or fake." She smiled sadly. "You always find a way to turn pain into poetry." He laughed softly. "Maybe because pain is the only honest teacher left." But even as they laughed, something darker was brewing behind the scenes. Someone inside the company, desperate to save their reputation, began leaking false rumors. They claimed Sandra had orchestrated the entire thing to promote her upcoming film. Anonymous posts spread across forums, accusing her of playing the victim for fame. Overnight, the tide shifted. Online trolls began attacking her. Headlines turned twisted. She received messages calling her manipulative and fake. Reporters camped outside her gate. The woman who had defended kindness was now being accused of using it. Keanu visited her as soon as he heard. She sat on the floor of her living room, surrounded by her phone, laptop, and piles of letters, some of support, many of hate. Her eyes were red. "They turned it all against me," she said. "Everything." He knelt beside her. "Breathe," This will pass. No, it won't, she whispered. People believe what hurts more easily than what heals. He touched her shoulder gently. Then let's remind them again. But this time, not through interviews or posts. She looked at him, confused. Then how? He stood up slowly. Through action, through something real. Let's do something that no rumor can erase. And at that moment, something new was born, a quiet idea that would soon grow into a global movement neither of them had planned. But before that could happen, one unexpected person from the dealership would come forward with a truth so personal and painful that it would change how the world saw both of them forever. The man who couldn't sleep. Do you know how guilt sounds when it speaks in the dark? Do you know how truth waits, heavy and silent, until someone finally dares to open their heart? And do you know how one confession can heal wounds that apologies never could? It was late at night when Keanu's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to answer. The voice on the other side was trembling, filled with hesitation and exhaustion. "Mr. Reeves," the man said quietly, "you don't know me, but I know you. I was part of what happened that day." Keanu's heartbeat slowed. He moved to the window, looking out at the dim city lights. "Who are you?" "My name is Daniel," the man said. "I worked at the dealership. I was the one who sent the message to that marketing team. I didn't know they'd planned something that cruel. I only wanted to save my job." Keanu didn't respond right away. His silence made the man's words spill faster, like water escaping a crack. "I've been trying to sleep for weeks. I can't. I saw you get pushed. I saw how you stood up calm and quiet, and it broke me, because I realized I'd become part of something ugly." Finally, Keanu said softly, "You called because you want forgiveness." The man's voice cracked. "No, I called because I want peace. I know I don't deserve it." Keanu closed his eyes. "We all make mistakes. Peace isn't about deserving, it's about choosing." There was silence again. Then the man whispered, "I used to look up to you. Your movies got me through my brother's death. I don't know how I let money blind me." Keanu felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. It was about the quiet sickness of a world that rewarded cruelty and punished compassion. "Where are you now?" he asked. "Still here," Daniel replied. "I haven't left the city. I wanted to tell you face to face, but I didn't have the courage." "Meet me tomorrow," Keanu said. "Same cafe near Sunset Boulevard." The next day, when Daniel walked in, his eyes were swollen, his hands shaking. He looked younger than Keanu had expected, maybe late 20s, worn out by regret. Keanu stood up and greeted him with a gentle handshake. No cameras, no anger, just two men facing the weight of their choices. Daniel spoke first. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to tell you that I was the one who told them you were coming. I thought it would impress my boss. I didn't know they'd turn it into a spectacle." Keanu nodded slowly. "You made a mistake, but you didn't push me." "No," Daniel said, "but I stood there. I watched it happen. I didn't stop it." Keanu looked at him quietly for a few seconds, then said, "You stopped it now. That matters." Daniel broke down crying right there in the cafe. Keanu didn't move away. He let him cry. When Daniel finally lifted his head, Keanu said softly, "If you really want peace, do something good for someone else. Don't repay me, repay the world." A few days later, Daniel reached out again. "There's something else you should know," he said. "The man who pushed you, he wasn't just hired. He needed the money for his daughter's surgery. They offered him more than he'd ever earned in a month. He didn't mean to hurt you. He just didn't think." Keanu felt his throat tighten. "His daughter," he repeated quietly. "Yes," Daniel said. "She has a heart condition. I thought you should know. That night, Keanu drove alone through the silent streets, the thought echoing in his mind. He parked outside an old hospital on the east side and sat there for a long time, staring at the lights in the windows. People were suffering, struggling, breaking, while the world outside mocked kindness and glorified cruelty. He couldn't change everything, but he could start somewhere. The next morning, he called Sandra. "I need your help," he said simply. "For what?" she asked. "For her," he said. "The little girl?" Sandra didn't ask more. She just said, "Tell me where to go." They met Daniel near the hospital, and he took them to a small waiting room where the man who had pushed Keanu sat, head in hands, looking smaller than guilt itself. When he saw them, he froze, eyes wide, voice shaking. I didn't mean..." Keanu raised a hand gently. "I know." He looked toward the girl through the glass window, small, pale, asleep under machines that hummed softly. "You did what you thought you had to. It was wrong. But I understand desperation." The man began to cry. "I lost my job. They promised money. I thought if I made a fool of myself, no one would get hurt." Keanu placed a small envelope on the table. "Inside is a check. It's not charity. It's a start. For her surgery. You'll pay it forward someday." The man stared in disbelief. "Why would you do this? After what I did?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Because the cycle has to end somewhere." Sandra watched the scene unfold, tears filling her eyes. In that small hospital room, the meaning of kindness became painfully real. It wasn't softness. It was strength. It was the choice to rise higher than the wound. Over the next few weeks, the story began to spread again, but this time, not through anger. It spread through gratitude. The man publicly thanked Keanu and Sandra, not to seek fame, but to apologize. The world listened again, quieter this time. The same people who once shared the video for shock now shared it for hope. Keanu and Sandra decided to use the attention differently. They launched a small foundation, the Quiet Light Project, dedicated to helping people who had been publicly shamed or humiliated. The goal was simple: to turn viral cruelty into visible compassion. They funded counseling, legal help, and education for those caught in digital storms. The first story they supported was Daniel's. He quit the dealership and began working as a coordinator for the foundation. He told everyone, "I was forgiven when I didn't deserve it. Now I'll spend my life proving that I can pass it on." And slowly, something remarkable began to happen. Letters poured in from people around the world. A student who had been bullied for stuttering. A mother who had been mocked online for her appearance. A teacher who lost her job after being filmed in a misunderstood moment. They all wrote the same thing. "Your story reminded me that dignity can survive anything." But as the movement grew, so did the resistance. Media outlets wanted interviews. Sponsors wanted branding. Companies wanted to use their foundation's name for marketing. One night, Sandra said, "We have to be careful. They'll try to turn kindness into a product again." Keanu nodded. "That's how the world works. We'll just keep giving quietly. No cameras, no announcements," she smiled. "And when people ask why we do it," he answered softly, "because the world needs proof that good still exists." But deep down, he knew something else was coming. Fame had a way of twisting even the purest intentions. Someone from the media had begun digging into Keanu's private past, trying to find pain to sell as headlines. And when they found it, they wouldn't hesitate to use it, no matter who got hurt in the process. And as the world celebrated his humility, a storm was forming quietly behind him, one that would test every lesson he had ever lived by, and every ounce of strength Sandra had left to protect him. The storm that broke the calm. Do you know what happens when the world that praised you starts digging for your pain? Do you know how fragile peace becomes when people turn kindness into curiosity? And do you know how it feels to be forced to face memories you buried to survive? It started one quiet evening. Keanu was returning home from the Foundation's small office, where he and Sandra had just reviewed new letters from people the Quiet Light Project had helped. The air outside was cool and soft, but something inside him felt heavy. He didn't know why, not yet. When he reached his house, he saw 2 cars parked nearby and men standing with cameras. One of them shouted his name, then another. Then flashes went off like lightning in a storm. He didn't respond. He walked silently inside. On his porch lay a folded newspaper, and across the front page in bold letters were the words, "The tragedy Keanu Reeves tried to hide." His chest tightened. He sat down, unfolded the paper, and saw photos from decades ago. Pictures of his late girlfriend, of the child he had lost before birth, of old interviews he had never spoken about again. They had written about it all, twisting grief into spectacle. One headline read, "His calm is not kindness, it's guilt." For a moment, the stillness inside him cracked. Not from anger, but from the ache of being misunderstood again. People wanted his peace, but they didn't understand what it had cost him to earn it. When Sandra called that night, her voice was urgent. "Don't read the comments," she said. "Too late," he replied softly. "It's everywhere. They had no right," she said fiercely. "They're trying to sell your pain." He smiled faintly, though his heart hurt. That's what the world does now. It feeds on heartbreak like entertainment. She was silent for a moment. "Come stay at my place tonight," she said finally. "You don't need to be alone right now." He didn't argue. When he arrived, she was already waiting at the door in a loose gray sweater, her hair pulled back, her eyes swollen from reading the same headlines. She hugged him tightly, and for the first time in years, he didn't resist. He let the tears come, quiet, invisible, but real. They sat on her couch, surrounded by silence and low city light. Sandra spoke softly. "You never told me about her," she said. "There wasn't much to tell," he whispered. "Just love. And loss. You carried it all alone," she said. "All these years," he nodded. "Grief doesn't like noise. It needs quiet." "I gave it that." She leaned closer. "You gave it peace. But you also gave it walls. Sometimes peace isn't healing, it's hiding." He looked at her, his eyes tired but kind. "Maybe. But if I took down the walls, I wouldn't have survived." Her hands trembled slightly. "You don't have to be everyone's strength, Keanu." "Not all the time." He gave a soft laugh. "And what if strength is all I have left?" She shook her head, tears spilling now. "No, what you have left is heart. That's what makes you different. That's why people trust you. That's why I—" She stopped, biting her lip. He looked at her gently. "Why you what?" She looked away. "Nothing. Forget it." But he didn't. That pause lingered between them like a held breath, fragile and full of meaning neither dared to name. Over the next few days, the storm worsened. Talk shows debated his private life. Online threads questioned his sanity. Some people defended him fiercely, others mocked him. News anchors used his pain as primetime empathy theater. The world that had called him the kindest man in Hollywood now dissected every quiet moment as signs of guilt. The Foundation's page was flooded. Daniel tried to manage the damage, but trolls began posting hateful comments, calling the project a publicity stunt. Donations froze. Media vans parked outside the building. The same kindness they had built their reputation on was now being twisted into a weapon against them. One afternoon, Sandra walked into the Foundation's office to find Keanu sitting alone, reading an email on his laptop. His face was pale. "What is it?" she asked. He turned the screen toward her. It was an anonymous message. "Stop pretending. The world knows your story now. Stop hiding behind charity." She clenched her fists. "They don't deserve to know anything about you." He closed the laptop quietly. "They already know more than they should." "Then let's fight back," she said. "Let's tell them the truth. About everything. About what we're doing here. About who you really are." He shook his head. "Truth doesn't need defending, Sandra. It just needs time." She slammed her hand on the table. "You're too calm, Keanu. This isn't peace anymore, it's surrender." He looked up, surprised by her tone. "You think I'm giving up?" "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I think you're disappearing. Every time something hurts you, you go quiet. Every time the world tests you, you hide behind patience. You don't have to keep proving you're kind." He stood, his voice still calm but heavier now. And if I stop being calm, who do I become? She stared at him, trembling. You become human. The words hit him harder than any headline could. For the first time, the calm mask cracked. He turned away, his breath uneven. You think being human means shouting, he said softly. For me, it means surviving the shouting. She stepped closer, her voice gentler now. Then let me share the silence with you. Stop carrying it alone. He turned slowly, and their eyes met. Two people broken by the same world, yet refusing to let it break each other. Later that night, they went live together for the first time since the scandal. No makeup, no script, no promotion. Just two friends sitting in a small room, speaking to the world as it was. Keanu began. People keep saying I'm calm because I'm strong. That's not true. I'm calm because I've seen what anger does to people. It ruins them. But calm doesn't mean painless. It just means choosing not to pass the pain forward, Sandra added softly. The world keeps turning kindness into a headline. But kindness isn't news, it's a choice. One we have to keep making, even when it hurts. The live stream lasted less than 10 minutes, but it reached millions. The comments were filled with people crying, apologizing, thanking them. One person wrote, "You reminded me that silence can be sacred, not weakness." But as the night faded and the lights turned off, Keanu sat quietly by the window, staring into the city. Sandra joined him, holding 2 cups of tea. "It's strange," she said. "You give people peace, but you never seem to find it for yourself." He smiled faintly. "Maybe peace isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you give away." She looked at him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And what happens when there's none left to give?" He didn't answer. He just looked at her, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Something deeper than friendship. Something built on years of shared pain and quiet respect. The next morning, before the sun rose, a letter arrived at the foundation's door. It had no name, only a few words written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for saving my daughter's life. She's healing. I owe you both everything." It was from the man who had once pushed Keanu. The letter ended with a small photo, a smiling girl standing in sunlight holding a flower. Sandra showed it to Keanu, and for the first time in weeks, he truly smiled. "See," she whispered. "The world still listens to goodness." But he shook his head slowly. "Not the world, Sandra. People, hearts, one at a time." And yet, even as hope returned, an unexpected call from Elena, the journalist who had helped them before, would once again shatter their fragile calm. What she had discovered this time would connect everything, the scandal, the leaks, and even the loss from Keanu's past, in ways that neither of them could have imagined. The letter he never sent. Do you know how truth sometimes waits for the right moment to be kind? Do you know how a broken heart can still heal others even after all its pieces are gone? And do you know what it means when silence finally turns into peace? The morning after the letter from the little girl arrived, Keanu and Sandra met Elena at a quiet park near downtown. She looked different this time, tired, serious, holding a thin brown folder that seemed to weigh more than paper should. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," she said softly, "but you deserve to know." She opened the folder and placed a few printed pages on the bench. Someone inside the marketing firm that started the dealership stunt confessed. They weren't just chasing clicks. They were following a private request. Keanu frowned. "A request from who?" Elena hesitated. "A name came up, and it connects to your past. Years ago, before all this, one of the executives was involved in a charity event your late girlfriend tried to start. It collapsed after her death. That same executive later used your name in several internal campaigns. This wasn't random. It was meant to test your reputation, to see how far your silence would carry." Sandra's eyes widened. "So they exploited his grief." "For marketing?" Elena nodded. "Yes. They wanted to prove that tragedy sells better than inspiration. They didn't expect you to turn it into compassion. That's why they panicked after it went viral. It ruined their plan." Keanu's face was unreadable, his voice steady but low. "So all of this started because someone tried to make money out of pain?" "Yes," Elena said. "But there's more. Before your girlfriend passed, she wrote a letter to you that was never delivered. Her family kept it private. I only found out because one of them saw the news recently and wanted you to have it. She held out a small white envelope, aged at the edges. They asked me to give it to you personally. The park went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Keanu stared at the envelope for a long time, his hands trembling slightly. Sandra reached out, her eyes full of quiet encouragement. He opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note, faint and gentle. The ink had faded, but the love in the words hadn't. My dear Keanu, I know you'll try to carry the world even when it's not yours to carry. Promise me you'll let life love you back someday. Don't turn your kindness into a wall. Let it be a door. If people ever hurt you for being gentle, remember, storms never last, but the calm you give them might save someone else. He read the letter twice, then closed it carefully and pressed it against his heart. Sandra sat beside him, her own tears falling silently. After a long pause, he whispered, "She always knew what to say. Even now." Sandra smiled faintly through her tears. "And you kept your promise. You turned pain into peace." He looked at her gently. "Not alone. You stood beside me when I forgot how." For a while, they said nothing. The park filled with distant laughter of children, the sound of life moving forward. Later that evening, Keanu recorded a small video message, not for interviews, not for fame, but for the people who had followed the story since the beginning. He sat on the same wooden bench from the first part of his life, wearing the same quiet smile. "Sometimes," he began, "the world tries to make your pain your identity. But pain isn't who you are. It's just what happens when love has nowhere else to go. I lost people I loved. I've been misunderstood. But I've also been surrounded by kindness I didn't deserve. If you're watching this, remember, you don't need to shout to be strong. You don't need to win to have worth. You just need to stay kind even when kindness hurts." He ended with a soft smile. "And if you ever forget that, maybe our story will remind you." The video spread quietly, not viral like the scandal, not explosive, just steady, sincere, reaching hearts one by one. People began sharing their own stories of forgiveness and healing. Some wrote letters to those they had wronged. Others started local kindness projects under the same name, The Quiet Light. Months later, the foundation expanded beyond what either of them expected. Schools used their story to teach empathy. Hospitals shared their message in counseling rooms. And somewhere, the little girl whose surgery had once been impossible was now healthy, playing outside with her father, who had rebuilt his life by helping others in the same hospital. As for Sandra and Keanu, they continued their work quietly. No red carpets, no interviews. Sometimes they appeared together at small charity events. Sometimes they disappeared for months, traveling to places where no one recognized them. But one thing remained unchanged: their bond. It was built on silence, honesty, and shared resilience. One evening, years later, Sandra and Keanu sat on a balcony overlooking the city they once feared would destroy them. She turned to him and said softly, "You know, I used to think kindness was fragile, but now I see. It's the strongest thing in the world." He smiled, looking at the horizon. "Kindness is fire," he said. "It burns quietly, but it lights everything around it." The sky turned golden, the city lights flickered below, and for a moment, everything was still. No headlines, no cameras, no noise, just two souls who had survived the storm by refusing to let go of what made them human. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Sandra whispered, "You think the world will remember this?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "It doesn't matter if it remembers us. What matters is that it remembers what we stood for, and with that, the story of pain turned into peace, of humiliation turned into healing, and of two people who showed that even in a world addicted to noise, silence could still speak louder than anything else."